All right, and welcome back to Press Turn, a video game podcast. And wait a minute, you're not Jonathan. Who are you?
Yes, I am Maurice Pogue. I am the former senior editor of Geeks Under Grace. I've been writing for Geeks Under Grace since 2015. I was the editor there in the video game department, starting from 2016 when Casey Covell realigned our departments, and every editor had a assigned department, excuse me. And I stepped down, I believe, in 2019, or I began the transition. And so now I'm a periodical contributor. But yeah, I put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into making the gaming department the best that it could be in that ministry. And yeah, so I've been invited to this show. I appreciate the invite. You've been trying to chase me for a while too.
Yeah, definitely. For people who don't know, I'm not sure if I mentioned it before, but Maurice here was the actual editor at the time and interviewed me. Um, Thanks to our mutual connection through John Campbell, who also used to work for Geeks Under Grace. Um, and honestly, even though we've never really talked too much, I always found your content very inspirational in terms of writing for articles because you seem to be like one of the few people that I've run into where you were very serious about your craft, even when it came to just the reviews that we had to do every month. So and like I kind of always valued your input whenever I heard you talk. So and just wanted to talk to you on this show just because we finally get to talk and this was the perfect excuse. But yeah, I was gonna have you here for one topic, but I figured that might be a bit too serious to just run into from the start. We're actually going to talk about the so-called boomer shooters, or rather the new wave of retro shooters like Quake and Doom Original. But first, tell me what you've been up to. What have you been playing or slash life achieving? I guess.
So first, I'd like to thank you for the compliments. It always so the humble brag portion of it, but also aspiring another generation of writers to be very passionate about their craft and things that they do. So yeah, we write because we're fans, but then also thinking a little bit more critically about the content that we consume. That's the other part that I secretly would try to push my team. Like yes, this game is awesome, but you know is could it be more? Like, is the writing solid? Have we seen these tropes and these stories before, and they're just being repackaged into another product for our consumption? Those sorts of things. And so I'm always trying to push that envelope, and that's like the soft topics, right? So you're asking me about boomer shooters, which I cringe internally even when you say boomer shooter, because I'm a millennial with Generation X tendencies. So it's like when you say boomer shooter and you're coming after my Duke Nukem and my Doom and my Quake. I'm like, hold on now. You need to pump your brakes. Pump your brakes, youngin. But
I mean, to be fair, like that is the moniker that has stuck, and it's not necessarily by fault. I mean, you know, um, a few episodes ago, Jonathan and I talked about the moniker of Metroidvanias and what that entails as
right.
well.
'Cause Joe doesn't like Metroidvania, and I've also adopted myself adventure platformer
Hmm.
to differentiate from. So Nintendo started making Metroids again, right?
Yeah.
So we have, what is that? It's what is the 3DS game? The
Samus
so
Returns.
okay, Samus Returns, which is the remake of Metroid 2,
Hmm.
and then which is Samus Returns, and then this new one that we recently played on the Switch, right?
Yeah. Metroid Dread.
Yeah, Metroid Dread. And so um yeah, I played both of those, and honestly, I was underwhelmed. Like, I know everybody thought that Metroid Dread was like the second coming of Metroid, but I feel like the genre has really evolved since our adaptation of the Metroid games. So yeah, Super Metroid is timeless and it's still excellent to this day. And Metroid Dread felt like they were trying to recapture bits of that. And I don't know, my review is out there on geeksandagrace.com for Metroid Dread. I was not as impressed. I think I gave it a 7. I need to look back at that. We're having some red website issues for some reason. It's harder to find. I'd have to send people the direct link to it. But
Mm.
I don't know. I play Metroid Dread and then I go back to Hollow Knight, and I'm like, there's not even a comparison. This is such an evolution. Hollow Knight from like Metroid Dread. So yeah, that's that. But you asked me what I was up to. Okay, so
Yep.
before I get ahead of myself, I did mention Boomer Shooter, so I'm at fault for that.
It's okay.
Um,
It's okay. I mean,
so,
that is part of what you were up to. So,
yeah, so I'm always thinking about these sorts of things. I don't just play games and consume them. So I actually have not been playing a lot of new stuff lately. Yes, I did play the new Horizon Forbidden West game. It's excellent. I'm in the process of writing a review for Geeks and the Grace for that, and I did enjoy it. I still think Guerrilla Games is on top of their game, so to speak. I guess you would call that a pun, right? Play on words, Guerrilla Games on top of their game, right? Um, it is an excellent evolution of what the formula they began with Horizon Zero Dawn in terms of character development and whatnot. I think it makes some of the similar mistakes as Mass Effect 2 does when it's going from Mass Effect 1 to Mass Effect 2.
mhm.
Um, it's you can play the game, you can see, okay, I can see what they were doing here with trying to give Aloy's best friends character development. They're not just side characters now, but now they're part of her quote unquote party um, on the quest to save the world, basically. And the overarching story, the big bad, um, well, don't want to give away spoilers, but I'll just say that not as impressive as, or it's a foreboding at the beginning, but at the end of the quest is like, well, actually they weren't that bad
Um,
because something even dreadful is looming afar,
right.
that sort of thing. So
Would you?
so
Sorry.
go
Would
ahead.
you say that this is perhaps a fault of copying the formula of the new open world format set upon Zelda Breath of the Wild?
Well, so I'm just talking about story right now.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about open world, we're talking more about gameplay, right?
Right.
So just in terms of plot, I can see that they were trying to copy Mass Effect 2 and also Witcher 3. So
Mm,
in
okay.
Horizon Zero Dawn, side quest felt so separated from the main quest that it was like, all right, this feels kind of like busy work, but the game is cool, it's gorgeous. Oh God, it's gorgeous. If you've played it on PlayStation 5, Horizon Zero Dawn, or the PC version at 60 frames per second, and I played Horizon Forbidden West on performance modes at 60 frames per second, it's one of the most gorgeous games I ever played. And I don't rate things highly like that. Like, I'm just not impressed by everything that I come across. Like, every year, this is the new best looking game, right? I'm
Mhm.
not like that. But Horizons Forbidden West is probably the best looking game I've ever played. All right. It's the way that the fauna, the ambient animals around, the sky, like, it's gorgeous, man. I can't believe they were able to do this on a PlayStation 4. Like, this game was developed for PS4, but it plays well on PS5 as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Um,
Wow.
and then, I just got through saying that Returnal is the best game I've ever played, which it's like, all right, well, Returnal doesn't use as its color palette isn't as broad as Horizon Forbidden West. It's
Mm,
still a good looking game in terms of like texture density and those sorts of things. But in terms of just sheer color and the dramatic change in environments, Horizon Forbidden West falls just short of Red Dead Redemption 2, because that snow in Red Dead Redemption 2, like the prologue, is still the best I've seen in all of video games, period. Trust me, you fire up that game, like go buy it on Steam or whatever, and if you've never played it, and just play through the prologue for like an hour and then like refund it if you have to, just so you can experience the horse trails going through the snow. But that's another thing. So you're asking about open world. Okay.
Yeah.
So open world design. Now Horizon Forbidden West adopts Witcher 3's method of side quests, where you will encounter characters that build the world. So yes, most of the world building in Horizon Zero Dawn was through the cauldrons. You go through the cauldrons, you get the information, you scan data. That's how you learn about the old ones, the ancient ones, and what they were doing as they were trying to combat the Pharaoh plague and all that kind of stuff. And that's the world building of the past into the present. Now you've all that already established. Now you're dealing with people who are surviving in this post-apocalyptic world and what that world building looks like. Okay. And so that's the part that is really excellent in Forbidden West as well, is that they introduced three key new tribes. And, so in the first game, it was like the Oseram, right? And I can't, Slayens tribe. I'm trying to think of who they are. And then there's also the main tribe, the Karja, the Oseram, and there's one more I'm forgetting. But there are three other tribes in Forbidden West now,
Right.
and they have to build them up. So when you look at the lore and how they've existed in this place that was forbidden, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like no one, like the Karja were like, no, you can't go past this wall. Well, why? Because of the Red Raids, and they have bad blood with the tribes on the other side of this particular partition. And so that's excellent now. Like it's not just side quests just to fill up time, but now you're learning about these new tribes that Guerrilla Games has provided us and how they've learned to survive in the post-apocalypse that is different than, say, the Sacred Lands and the Nora, who are just like very, very insular. And if you leave the Sacred Lands, you are basically an apostate, right? You can't come back.
Right.
Whereas these other people have adapted to to everything that's happening. So that's really cool. And then there's the mechanic thing. So you're mentioning Breath of the Wild. One of the features that everyone loved about Breath of the Wild was that you could climb everywhere. And Forbidden West, they've opened that up a little bit more, which is good. But for traversal purposes and side questing is not as open, which I respect the limits that Guerrilla Games put on climbing. Some people say it's kind of cumbersome still and those sorts of things, but I respect that they wanted. There are some unlocks that are very important that happen throughout the game, and they want players to experience the joy in finding that kind of stuff toward the end game before everything unlocks. So in a way, yeah, Nintendo is still very revolutionary in that they're like, all right, here's Link. You can go fight Ganon right away. Well, actually, no, you can't. You have to do the typical, collect 3 things, then the world opens up. But once it opens up, you can go straight to Ganon and fight him, or you can go to the Guardians and get powered up. Whereas Forbidden West, there is a specific there's a story that you have to play the main missions in order to get to the main quest. So that's still a core mechanic and core feature. The other part about it that I appreciate that a lot of people have been criticizing. So in not Forbidden West, in Breath of the Wild, people hate weapon degradation, right? I learned to adapt to it, and I realized Nintendo wanted to put that into the game because they didn't want people to use the same weapons. Like you would never experiment if you found one really cool weapon and you just use that forever, right? So if I break your weapon, now you're forced to use different ones, and you learn things that you wouldn't have before. So I can respect that. Forbidden West does something similar. You don't have broken weapons. It's just that there are a lot of elements that are introduced into the game for machine weaknesses, and they're not always readily available to the player. So you might struggle in the early game fighting certain machines because you haven't found the element that is weak to. Um, and then when you try to upgrade those upgrades are difficult to find. So I'm not a fan of crafting. I like my crafting streamlined. Like I should just be able to play through the game naturally and just find the things without having to scavenge for them to
Reach.
get to get my upgrades. Like I feel like that's how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Or you can do what Prey did, and um, you can go anywhere on the ship in Prey. Also, an excellent, outstanding game. If you haven't played Prey,
Yeah.
definitely jump on that. Where once you get like the glue gun or whatever it's called, now you can progress in any order you want and figure out how to conquer bad guys. So Forbidden West, you will have to spend dedicated time hunting animals or certain machines so that you can upgrade your weapons. Now that's part of the grind of the open world that I would caution folks on, and I kind of like it and I don't like it. I like it in one way where it's like if you are a completionist and you want to play on hard, then there's a lot for you to do. You have a lot of work ahead of you to fully upgrade your weapons. I beat the game and I only got most of my weapons to level 3, but most weapons go up to level 5. And I'm talking about the purple tier weapons, not the green ones or like the intermediate ones, which I think are blue. I'm talking about the purple ones. And then
Mm.
there's a tier above that, the orange legendary ones, which I didn't even get a legendary weapon. So I have to go back to the game and play more of that. So there's plenty to do for folks who want to get to maximize their game in terms of open world design. So you were asking about that. So I'm going to be quiet for a second so you can ask another follow up question.
Yeah. I do find that interesting where it's like you are comparing Forbidden West to Prey 2013. I believe that's when it came. Um but I think it is interesting where it's like because from what I've played of Zero Dawn um a couple months back, what I found really interesting was like uh even though Horizon Zero Dawn still was following a formula, so to speak. Um, like crafting wasn't necessarily hard because there were always ways to get the materials that you need. It wasn't. It didn't always come down to like, oh, you have to go to like this specific region of the map, because the entire map, um, pretty much roughly has like all the same materials for the most part, with some exceptions, depending on like what type of land it is or what type of beast you have to hunt. Whereas in with prey, it's more of just like it gives you it gives you access to an extremely versatile tool right at the beginning, and then just allows you to naturally just decide where you want to go with access to that tool and make the discoveries of what that tool can actually let you do along the way. I believe it's like two different forms of progression where it's like there's the more intended part and there's the more it's more like a sandbox, I guess. Um, but a much more contained environment. Uh,
Yeah, so the glue gun, what we're talking about in Prey, is a nod to, say, Half Life 2's gravity gun, right?
mhm.
Which was a revolutionary weapon in the first person shooter, right? In terms of what you could do. And when we ask the question about, you know, iterative gaming, Like, what's new? So like when I say Metroid Dread, it's kind of meh because it doesn't really introduce anything to me new. It's just a bunch of callbacks to nostalgia
Mm-hmm.
because the genre has evolved. That's what we're talking about. We're looking at like Half-Life 2, which is like early 2000s, and then Prey, which is actually 2017. And I can say this glue gun is, it does things that are similar to the gravity gun in Half-Life 2 that just opens up and like distinguishes itself from other first person shooters,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's what I'm always looking for when I'm playing a game. What does this game do that distinguishes itself? So like Horizon Zero Dawn, all right, so we're really shooting bows and arrows. Like there are no gun, like there are guns in the Horizon games. You have to get them off of the machines first, though.
Right.
But like no one, like gunpowder is not a thing. So you have to use bows and arrows. You have to use like trip wires. You have to use um, slingshots.
Mm-hmm.
You have to use spears. Like this is like caveman stuff, but high tech, and that's cool. Like the fusion of the past with the present, or even the future, even beyond, because we're not making machines that are like a Thunderjaw, like a Tyrannosaurus Rex, right? We haven't even gotten there yet in our times now.
Right.
And that's the selling point. Like that's the sci-fi thing that I like, and that's why I like sci-fi.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but so I've been playing Horizon. Um, let's see what else I've been playing. What is this? There's a shooter by Housemark that's on PlayStation. Um, it's an evolution of Defender. What is
Uh,
it called? I'm trying to think of it. I've been playing that. It's an exclusive for PlayStation, like a little indie project. Housemark makes shooters, so that's a pretty fun game. Retro. I
oh,
can't.
actually, like you are talking about Returnal, right?
So Returnal, yes, I played and beat that. That
Uh-huh.
was that was a while ago. Yeah, outstanding. But then because I loved Returnal so much, I wanted to go back and play some of Housemark's older projects, and
Okay.
so that sent me to like PlayStation 3, where they published basically an evolution of Defender 2 from like the NES days. I'm trying to remember what it's
Oh, so
called
you're
though.
you're talking about Resogun then, right?
Yes,
Okay.
Resogun. So I've been trying to play Resogun and get like perfect. So basically, save all the humans. Um, so I'm like on the second to last level, to penultimate level, and I keep dying at the last ball, at the final boss. But I've put that down for a couple weeks now. I played through Shadow Tactics, Blades of the Ico's Choice was really good. Shadow Tactics is an outstanding evolution of Commandos, and so I say evolution a lot. I don't like to repeat myself, but that's what I'm looking for. So it's not just nostalgia; it's
Yeah.
also progress. Like, what are you doing new? And so Commandos 2 was World War II based, but Shadow Tactics is now you have samurai, and then you look at Desperados 3 are cowboys basically, and how changing up um, the characters, the settings creates new possibilities.
Mm.
There are a couple boomer shooters, I guess you could say, that I have in there. Medieval, Project Warlock. We can talk about those a little bit later on. And Jupiter Hell was a really fun, true roguelike. Not a rogue light like Hades, but a rogue like, as in permanent death. Like you die, you lose everything. um,
Oh, so it goes back to like the original formula where um if you die, you don't have any progression trees or anything like that.
Correct. The most you get is if you go far enough, you unlock a new character class, but
Mm,
you don't get like new weapon unlocks. You might discover a new weapon that you didn't discover before, like Binding of Isaac. When you play through that and you progress, it'll unlock something that you can find later. That's not how Jupiter Hell works. You can find the top tier gear or whatever on your first run ever, and then never ever find it again for as long as you play the game. Like it's
right.
like that kind of game. But they developers are aware that they're not trying to make their game so impossibly hard that everyone plays it and they quit, right?
Mm,
So there's some RNGesus in there to bless folks, and that's what I appreciated when I played through Binding of Isaac. Even though I have some strong opinions about it in terms of its depiction of Christianity,
Mhm.
to which once upon a time ago, and probably my one of my shining achievements in my tenure at Geeks Under Grace is that Edmund McMullen, someone showed him on a Reddit post somewhere. I should have saved a screenshot.
Oh
They
man.
showed them my Binding of Isaac article where I break down all the Christian themed things in his game and why they're problematic. And he said something like mission accomplished, right?
Yeah.
Because he's a very staunch atheist.
Mhm.
So like he actually replied to someone who showed them my article on Binding of Isaac. So that was a shining achievement of mine.
Mhm.
Streets of Rage 4, the DLC is really fun. Industries of Titan is an early access simulation, not unlike RimWorld. Very fun, but they still have some things to work out. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Days Gone. So Days Gone is a game that I didn't review because someone already wrote a review for it on the PlayStation 4 version.
Mhm.
And when I was editor at Geeks on the Grace, I didn't like re-reviewing ports. Um, but I did an article on it on the PC version, and I was very surprised by that game. You talking about judging a book by its cover? I was looking at the biker gang stuff, and I was like, that's totally contrary to like my culture, my upbringing. Like I have nothing to do with that. I don't know anything about it. Don't care for it.
Right.
But I played that game, and it's fantastic. You talking about open world zombie apocalypse game that does things that I won't say revolutionize, but definitely contributes to the genre in productive ways, similar to Left 4 Dead, um, that are impressive and they should be recognized. And it's sad. It's a sad thing that Days Gone came out probably the same year as a game like God of War
Yeah.
or The Last of Us or something. I think there was a big game that came out when Days Gone came out. I feel like it's God of War,
Uh
the reboot, and everyone forgot about Days Gone. Like it doesn't exist, and that's sad. I really feel like people should play that game. It's worth your time. And I think that pretty much concludes what I've been up to because I've been playing a lot of Dota 2.
Okay, fair enough.
I also saved Shadow Warrior, which I just submitted the review for.
3?
Um, no,
Or
yeah, Shadow Warrior 3. So
oh wow,
that's
okay.
that's within your boomer shooter genre. So
Yeah,
Shadow Warrior,
pretty
a
close.
medieval project, Warlock. I'm missing one. I'm just looking at my Steam library and what it's telling on me what I've been playing lately. Oh, Ion Fury,
Ion Fury, yeah, wow. Oh man. I love Ion Fury, but
formerly known as Iron Maiden,
yes.
Ion Maiden.
Yes. Uh Thanks very much. Certain band that we won't mention because they're complete jerks. Don't buy their music. I don't know, whatever. Do what you want. But
I
yeah.
liked them before they started picking on this little indie company trying to publish their little video game. That's just mean.
Yeah. I mean, it is what it is, but at the same time they probably could have handled it better too. Um but yeah, so for me, um haven't really done much, honestly. Taking a little bit of a break from Elden Ring.
Yeah, that's
Just
the
to
elephant in the room. We were talking about open world design, and we
yeah,
didn't mention Elden Ring, and that's what everyone's talking about right now.
yeah.
So, Elden Ring is high fantasy,
Mhm.
and I tend to hesitate delving into high fantasy because I don't know. There's something insidious, I think, about high fantasy and like its genre tropes and those sorts of things that, to be quite frankly, aren't inclusive. And I feel like that's attractive to a certain segment of folks. So
Mm,
I hesitate to. So, like, you have a samurai class, right?
yeah.
But can you make an Asian looking character? Is a question I have.
Uh, I mean, well, okay, to be fair, the Dark Souls character creators aren't exactly known for the ability to make accurate looking characters. I would say it's more accurate to say it's a character creator meant to make ugly characters. Honestly,
Which is okay. So we're talking about the upper echelon of games, right? The Dark
yes.
Souls series has a rabid fan base that will fight you to the bloody death if
Mhm.
you critique it, right? I did the so I've always called it Demon Souls because I played the PlayStation 3 Demon
Yes.
Souls game.
Yeah.
So I've always called it the Demon Souls series where everyone else says the Dark Souls series.
Yeah.
And when I played the remaster on PS5, I was like, this is good, but it's also it is a remake, but a lot of the mechanics are old. Like it feels like a PlayStation 3 game even though it's pretty,
Mhm.
right? And it's like, all right, so what year was that? That's PS3, okay? So we're talking about 2000s, right? So we're
Early,
in
like practically a launch title, I think.
okay. So we're in the 2020s now.
Yeah.
So we're 2 decades removed, and why is the character creator still looking like Boo Boo? As opposed to a game like that's still in early access, Baldur's Gate 3,
Mhm.
and now you have beautiful. Now, of course, that goes into the genre trope of if I'm going to be playing, 100-hour long game and I want to be a character creator, I want to make someone who I enjoy looking at.
Mhm.
Yes, that has something to do with it too. But in our pre-show, we were talking about like Japanese design and not taking character creators seriously as Western um, developers. I think is a demerit. I don't think you can give a game a 10 out of a 10 when your character looks janky. All right.
Yeah.
And that's before I get to back to the question of can you actually make an Asian samurai in the game? Right?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, no, because and to be perfectly honest, like it's tough to really say why samurai is really offered as a class in terms of um I guess how it makes sense with the lore of the world itself, because the way Souls games are designed with their story is that not everything is made clear. You kind of have to pick up bits and pieces of information and try to retrace the narrative yourself. Yourself referring to the individual player. Um, and it's always been something where I feel like the character creator in Souls games, they're not meant to be. It's not supposed to be viewed as like a vehicle to make exactly the character you want, but to make a character, um, but to make essentially the vehicle for the player, if that makes sense. Um, because a common theme around all the Souls games is that the player character is like a lost soul or a weakened
A vessel.
individual. Yeah.
Like the maiden in black would say, you are a vessel, you are
Yes.
a
Yeah. Yeah.
means to an end.
Mhm.
Which fair. And if that's the case, why bother with a character creator at all? you know?
That's true. It probably like honestly, you know what I think? It probably was one of those things where it's like they probably just had to put it in because otherwise nobody would play the game. Um
It's a genre expectation. If I'm going to have
yeah.
RPG elements where you collect souls or whatever the thing is that you collect to level up at the candlelight or fireplace or whatever it is
Mhm.
that the game that you're playing, Bloodborne, Elden Ring, whatever. Um, yeah, the expectation is that if I'm playing an RPG character, I should be able to name my character at the minimum,
Mhm.
and then also have some sort of say as to what they look like.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not. I don't do the devil's advocate thing, I just want to return to my original point of like high fantasy being attractive to a certain segment because high fantasy traditionally is not inclusive. I just want to make sure that everyone who listens to the podcast understands that. So like if
Oh,
I,
yeah. No, for sure.
if I want to make myself in the game a black guy with like black style hair, can I do that? The answer is no. There are articles about that,
Mhm.
about Elden Ring and how it fails people of color in the character creator, which is why I asked you the question about can you actually make an Asian samurai? If you can't make an Asian samurai, now you're entering to well, samurai are cool, ninja are cool,
Yeah.
right? But now you're in like appropriation and Japanophilia and all that kind of stuff
Yeah.
in your RPG that's Japanese developed. So now you have Japanese people who are appropriating themselves to market toward Western audiences
Yeah.
because that's basically what this RPG is. It has the tradition of old school, you know, was it King's Bounty or something like that? Like in the 90s, 80s, 90s of like these super hard
Oh, okay.
um, RPGs. Like if you have to play the game and figure it out yourself, and people take great pride of that. Even though now people secretly look on YouTube and they act like that they conquered the boss in the first try and all that kind of stuff. But I
Oh,
ain't gonna call
man.
them out.
Just calling us out, man. You're
Hey,
gonna
hey,
do.
hey. I'm just saying, man. I'm just saying. So I'm the kind of person. I'm a power player. Okay, so if I know I'm going to, I've got a wife, kids, full time job. So if
Yeah.
I'm going to play a game, I want to play it efficiently.
Mm.
So, yes, there's a certain appeal to like toughing it out and just figuring it out. But man, I've got a backlog. So if I get stuck on Fire Lurker, which I've never beaten Fire Lurker by myself, by the way, on
Mhm.
Demon Souls, I've always summoned a blue person to help me out. I'm going to do it because the game allows me to.
Yeah.
Right? That's your lifeline.
Yeah.
What is that show where you call someone? One who wants to be a millionaire and you call your lifeline. Yeah, that's what it is. But if you go on the internet, the culture is you've got to tough it out. You've got to get your butt kicked by this boss and have this feeling of relief when you finally conquer them by
Yeah.
yourself. The bootstraps thing and all that kind of stuff. It's like, man, all of us don't have time for that. So
No, for
it's not
sure.
even you do you. On the other hand, if I play a game like what's the other From Software game that is ninja like through and through, Sekiro.
Oh, okay.
So,
I
so
thought
I
I thought
did.
we were gonna talk about Tenchi, and I got a little
Yeah,
excited.
yeah. Well, Sekiro. See, all right, I'm gonna throw evolution in there. So
Uh-huh.
Sekiro is an evolution of Tenshu.
Mhm.
Now with demon souls like mechanics, or gameplay. You just can't, like, if you get seen, if you can't pull off assassination, now you're in a tough fight, a really hard fight.
Mhm.
And ninja traditionally aren't fighters, they're assassins. They're not trained like samurai to fight. And so generally if a ninja's caught, they're gonna die.
Right.
You know. But in Sekiro, it's a video game, so it's a power fantasy naturally. So you're skilled, and so you're able to fight, samurai and demon possessed, or whatever you want to call that lore. So that's another From Software game that's full of lore, and you can up for interpretation. But I played through Sekiro without referring to the internet and all that kind of stuff because it was different. It wasn't. It wasn't the same as like it is high fantasy, but rife in a specific culture, not this vague, Eurocentralized sort of feel, if that makes sense.
Okay.
It's very specific to, Japanese lore and fantasy and those sorts of things,
Yeah.
right down to a dragon, right? Um, and so I'm just saying this in terms of general. So, like, I have not actually played Elden Ring, so people could say, "Well, you don't actually know what you're talking about." But I played enough video games to where I can look at one and say, "Yeah, I kind of get what direction that's going."
Mhm.
I will play it eventually, though. The thing is that either a friend of mine loans me his copy, or B, I finish uh, the Demon Souls games because I played through Demon Souls 2 all the way up to when the expansion was announced. And I said, I'm going to finish it with the expansion because I like playing through the game in its entirety. I don't like playing the game and then DLC comes out and I got to go return to it. I'm not a fan of that. I like playing everything all at once and I move on to the next thing. but I never did get
Completely
back to
fair.
it. So I
Completely
never
fair.
did get back to it. So I never touched Demon Souls. Demons, actually, no, not Demon Souls 2. I meant Demon Souls 1. They announced an expansion. So I hadn't played that one, 2, or 3. And so I said, if I want to play Elden Ring, I need to do my homework and play these 3 first, then play Elden Ring, which I probably would get burned out by the time I get there. Or my friend who I loaned my copy of what's the PlayStation 4 Samurai game? Everyone wanted it to be Game of the Year, but
Neo?
The Last of Us 2 won.
Are,
What's the name of it though? I can't think of it right now.
are you talking about Neo by Tecmo?
No. It's
Oh, Ghost of Tsushima.
yes,
Yeah.
Ghost of Tsushima. Thank
Okay.
you. So I loaned my copy of Ghost of Tsushima to him, and I said, "You have a PlayStation 5. Play this in performance mode, 60 frames per second, and get back to me." And that was almost a year ago. He purchased Elden Ring, and he was like, "Yeah, I need to give you my copy of Ghost of Tsushima because I finished it." And have you played Elden Ring? And I was like, "No." And I was like, "Yeah, it's awesome. Maybe because you let me borrow this one, I'll let you borrow Elden Ring." So we'll see.
Hmm.
I meet him on Saturday, so we'll see if I'll end up with a copy of Elden Ring in my hands.
Cool. Yeah, and I mean, just to add on to that, real quick, I definitely understand that. Although at the same time, I feel um, like there seem to be a lot of Japanese developers who have hung on to the like the way you put it, the Eurocentric high fantasy structure, um, and just how they enjoy the aesthetic of that fantasy setting. Um, just because, well, I would have to imagine it's something they're not even really used to. I mean, like when we talk about influences for even some of the earliest JRPGs, like Final Fantasy, for example, um, like it all kind of comes back to like the really old games, like the stuff before Might and Magic, Ultima, and stuff like that.
Oh man, you speak my language.
Yeah.
Not might. I'm a Heroes of Might and Magic guy,
Heroes of
not
Might and
Might and
Magic,
Magic.
yes.
But for me, so they're two different series, but they're related. Like some of the heroes show up in both games.
Yeah.
So I know of the Might and Magic games, and yeah, that. And I'm glad you said Might and Magic and Ultima because yes, those are games that are in the legacy of the Demon Souls series, right?
Yeah.
Dark Souls, Demon Souls. But yeah, that's where I got my high fantasy from, like Heroes of Might and Magic. So that's where I get my dragons and griffins and all that kind of stuff. But what you're saying does make sense. Like there might be an appeal in a Japanese sense where they're not inundated with Lord of the Rings,
Hmm.
right? And so this might be fascinating to them because it's a different kind of mythos. So yeah, that's a good point you make.
Yeah. Um, and I mean, I think it's just like it's very interesting how they, at the very least, even if it's within the constraint of that fantasy setting, they're still able to take that and mold their own type of fantasy settings to varying degrees. I mean, like not it. I wouldn't say every JRPG fantasy franchise is exactly the same. Um, even down to gameplay, which is like the most mechanical you could get. Like Dragon Quest games don't play like Final Fantasy games, or even like, oh goodness, like I mean, like even Megami Tensei is a far stretch compared to Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, where it's just like, hey, you know what? Let's just take it to present day and then add a ton of sci-fi to it and start talking about like cybermancy, uh, devil summoning programs where where like demons are summoned through the manipulation of data, and it's just like what?
So I have not played this series myself, but this sounds sexy. I need to be playing these games. Uh,
Yeah.
I was gonna tell you though, you were trying to think of another game similar to Final Fantasy, and I was gonna say Shining Force,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Breath
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
Fire.
Breath of
Those are
Fire.
the RPGs that are in the Final Fantasy pantheon. If you
Yeah.
want to, look for copycat sort of games.
And actually, like stuff like Mana, Lufia, Actriser. Oh my goodness. All of them have kind of their own takes on what that fantasy setting would be. Even though I'm pretty sure like Actraiser and Lufia were. Oh wait, no, they weren't. They weren't Enix or Square. I think it was a different company.
Yeah, act. Well, you say Act Riser. I usually say Act Razor. That was Enix.
That was Enix. Okay.
That was Enix. Before Square Enix. Um, but yeah, there's a I. So these early games, there's a certain innocence to them, right?
Hmm.
Because Final Fantasy was named Final Fantasy because that company was going to go defunct if that game was not successful.
Yep.
And lo and behold, it was. And so here we are. I don't know, 15 going on 16 iterations, not counting the spinoffs
Oh
and
my
the
goodness.
sequels, right?
Too many
So
spin-offs. Way too many
so
spin-offs.
so so in those days, when I say innocence, I mean, all right, so here are Japanese companies discovering or creating high fantasy in the Western sense derived from Dungeons and Dragons, right? We,
Hmm.
we all agree that Dungeons and Dragons would be like the progenitor of like modern nerd geekdom high fantasy with a
Pretty.
dash of um, Lord of the Rings, right? So Lord of the
Yeah.
Rings is the book, and then Dungeons and Dragons is the actual gameplay. Here are the rules. Here are what these creatures are. Here are um, their origins. All this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So if we're creating like Final Fantasy, Breath of Fire, Shining Force, stuff like that, and there's a centaur, which is actually mythology, right? So
Hmm.
so so you're talking about all kinds of Western derived media. The innocence is all right. We're just making a game, okay?
Yeah.
And in that regard, I'll say, cool. I agree with that. They're just making video games. All right. Now, if we fast forward to today, or even 10 years from the original Final Fantasy, 20 years from original Final Fantasy, it's like, you can't just say that I'm making this game and then I can't find characters that look like me who are meaningful in the game because I want to
Mm-hmm.
participate in this imaginary experience too,
Mm-hmm.
right? There are a lot of people, women in games, et cetera, et cetera. You can insert your demographic. Like there are a lot of people playing video games. And so that innocence is lost when you continue to provide the same iterations and interpretations of fantasy. And yeah, so that's basically where I'm going with that. Like,
Yeah, for sure. I mean it all just comes back to like the fact that it's like inclusion, um like no matter how small of an effort you make, it is still important to have because we don't live in the that world where it's just like all these companies are just trying to be able to thrive. Now it's like, okay, now that they're in higher positions of power, maybe there can be some more push. But it's kind of like what I'm noticing now is that it's becoming more and more clear that in order to really express those types of changes in video games, uh, you got to get out of the system now in order to make those games. Like,
I don't think so. I think there are some companies that are. So there's a way to do it, okay? You
okay,
don't have to say Laura Croft is a female protagonist. You
right,
just have a female protagonist.
hmm
And she does things that Nathan Drake does in Uncharted. Now, of course, suspension of disbelief and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, we suspend disbelief when, um, you know, what I'm saying, okay, so I'm in, my brain's moving faster than my mouth is. Suspension of disbelief that a woman could do all of those things, but
Hmm.
we suspend disbelief every time 007 appears on the screen,
Yeah.
or like Nathan Drake takes out an entire cadre, like a platoon of people over the course of one video game, let alone the trilogy.
Mm.
Or no, it's not a trilogy, just 4 games, right? Are there 4 Uncharted? Yeah, there's four
Yeah,
Uncharted's.
yeah, there are
So so Nathan Drake takes out, like, over the course of those games you play on normal mode, probably, well, I won't
hundreds,
say. Yes,
thousands.
yes. Like, I was going to say an entire division of a military force.
With with a smile and a crack of a joke.
Yes, and it's like that is absurd,
Yeah.
But let's put a woman in place of that, and now it's like, oh, and then there's the fault of the developers
I don't
when
know,
they
man. I don't
when they
think.
originally. I just want to finish this part.
Oh, okay,
When
okay,
the
okay.
developers were like, we wanted to make Laura Croft feel vulnerable, and like the player, has to feel for her and all that kind of stuff. It's like, man, get out of here with that. You
It,
don't have to do any of that with
you
Nathan
know,
Drake. Come on.
it's always funny though because like I still remember some of the bosses from the original Tomb Raider series, and it's just like Lara Croft taking on wolves, bears, mummies, a T-Rex, and then like at the end of the first game, it's just like a giant ancient entity from like the depths of the underworld, and it's just like the most horrifying thing. And she just takes it down with guns.
Yes,
Just
with
like
pistols, with
yeah,
magnums or Uzis if you find them. And that's
yeah,
the other thing, in the Tomb Raider games, you could have just played the whole game through pistols, and
yeah.
you never find the shotgun and all that kind of stuff. I think there's some places where they find it, but what I was going to say is that there's some developers that are taking those risks, and
Mhm.
they're not saying, "Hey, we're doing diversity."
They're just
Look,
doing it.
they're
Yeah.
just doing it. Okay,
Yes.
they're just saying deal with it. When Apex Legends. So shout out to uh what's the game that the multiplayer, okay, there's two of them. Apex Legends is derived from, now I'm drawing a blank.
Titanfall.
Titanfall, yes.
Yes.
Shout out to
Okay.
Titanfall 2.
Yeah.
If we were talking about first person shooters,
Oh man.
one of the best campaigns I've ever played in any genre. Okay. So Apex Legends, they have two prominent black female playable characters, and they just posted that on their media, their advertisements,
Oh yeah.
and they didn't say here's our black character like Overwatch is, Blizzard dangling this one black playable character in front of our face. If you play Overwatch 2, you'll get to play as a black female character.
Yeah.
They're not doing that. They're just like, here are these characters. Like, play with them if you want to. If you
It,
don't, that's cool.
it is kind of crazy how like back when I jumped back into Apex Legends, like all of a sudden it was just like, man, this little Bella character is just like everywhere. Is she really that popular? And then I looked at her set and I was like, oh, I see. Her set is really good.
Yeah.
It's
So
just like, yeah,
we've come a long way over the years since Rochelle in Left 4 Dead 2, where a
yeah.
lot of fans, I'll say, fans with a little bit of venom and ether, didn't like Rochelle because they felt like she was taking the place of Zoe.
Yeah.
But I want to say this: Horizon Forbidden West is the most diverse game that most diverse AAA game that I've ever played, and it's impressive. Okay, and I'm shocked at the lengths that Guerrilla Games went to be that inclusive, not just from rendering, like taking the time to say, okay, this is what a black person looks like or an Asian person looks like, and then rendering it on the screen and surrounding Aloy with these characters like, hey, if we were to reset the planet, this is what it would look like. Like, literally, the planet is more brown than it is white.
Hmm.
Like, if you travel the world. And if an AI were to regenerate the population, this is how diverse it would actually be. Like, if you surround yourself with the world's population, right? And I'm like, okay, this makes sense. Not only do they do that, but they also get the voice acting to pair it with, because normally you play an RPG, there'll be like a black character and it'll be a generic white voice actor. I
Mhm.
don't think I played through that game for 100 hours, and I don't feel like I encountered very many characters where the character's voice did not match. I think they painstakingly said, we really are serious about this,
Mm.
and we're going to do it. But they didn't advertise it. You just play through the game, and you come to realize, holy crap,
Yeah.
there's a lot of diversity in this game. And yeah, shout out to Guerrilla Games for that.
That's definitely cool. It's just too bad it had to come out on the same week as, one of the most highly anticipated games.
It's the second time.
Yeah.
The first Horizon Zero Dawn came out when Breath of the Wild came out.
I think there was another game that was also coming out at the same time too, which, didn't help with that, like, it split up the audience even more. Um, I think I wanna say it was a Fallout game, but I'm not sure.
I think Horizon Forbidden West will get its due. Yeah, of
Yeah.
course, everybody's crowning Elden Ring Game of the Year, but I have a theory that games that are usually released early in the year, unless they're like Nintendo, such
Mhm.
as Breath of the Wild, by the time fall hits, a lot of people forget. Like Resident Evil always publishes earlier in the year,
Yeah,
and by Game of the Year awards, most people have forgotten about it.
pretty much.
God of War is still on the horizon, like God of War 2, right? Or
Oh,
whatever it's called,
yeah.
Ragnarok.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
God of War Ragnarok is on the
Ooh.
horizon. So we'll see if Elden Ring holds.
It probably will, but, we'll see. We'll see where the numbers stack up by the end of the year. There's still time for sure. Um, but yeah,
My personal game though is Half Homeworld 3. That's what I'm looking forward to.
nice. So anyway, back to my week. Heck of a tangent we went on there, but yeah,
You've been
so
chasing me for a while trying to get me on this show, man. We got a
for
lot to
sure.
talk about.
Oh yeah. And I'm trying to get to it fast because oh my goodness, we're talking so much. Um, so other than like just a little bit of Elden Ring, let me see. I didn't actually play all that much. However, I think it's been almost over a week now since Testament dropped for Guilty Gear Strive, and I was just like, you know what? I think it's one of those times I just want a big old session. So I called up my buddy and said, "Hey, you want to just play some rounds of Guilty Gear Strive?" And he said, "Sure." So last night we played like 3 hours of Strive, and I was blowing up his Potemkin with Testament, and he was blowing me up after I switched to Chip, which against Potemkin is probably like the absolute worst matchup ever in the world. Pretty much just like where it's like Testament plays um mostly ranged, and it's kind of important to like keep long range pressure on the opponent, to the point where it's like I pretty much have to uh I pretty much had to like learn how to set play, which is basically just like, okay, I have to use these two moves first before going even attempting to go in, because if I don't have these options, I'm just gonna get destroyed. Um, Testament has mainly two mechanics where there's the curse and then there's their uh their tracking attack, which is basically like this crow that flies by Testament's side, and pretty much you have to uh, there's like a few specials that you have to hit the opponent with, and it doesn't have to like actually hit them. If they block it, it's still um puts the tracker on them. And then once the tracker's there, it makes it much more easier to send the crow out. And then you hit them with curse. And curse is something that's held over from Guilty Gear Double Cross, where in that game, um, it just does like extra damage, but it's like an explosion, so it could possibly lead to knock um like actual hit stun, or in some cases like can help with a bounce, or for in the case of Strive could also help with causing a wall splat. Uh, so uh, so
I mean, a lot
basically,
of that stuff makes sense to me because I have a
yeah,
background in fighting games.
yeah.
I'm not sure if the audience
I,
all would
I'm
follow.
I'm trying to explain it as concretely as possible, but it is a lot to take in. Testament is definitely one of those characters where it's like it sounds like a lot, but honestly, like the game plan is fairly simple, which is pretty much just like get curse on the opponent and then pressure the opponent from like far to mid screen with like some of the projectiles. The only thing is like um Testament does not necessarily get a lot of that damage for free. Like I can't just spam those projectiles because especially with like how um like the models are and how their hitboxes and hurt boxes work. Um with with the way Testament shoots out their projectiles, there's actually like a certain point where I could actually get clipped by the opponent if they have an attack that can actually reach that state. So say if like I'm here and my opponent is here, and then I do an attack that does my projectile, but I start like going out about this far. If they can just like tap me, and that could be something like a low, a crouching jab, or like, or even a sweep. Which, if they catch me with a sweep, I'm getting counter hitted super hard, and I'm just gonna eat this damage. And especially against Potemkin, that was really dangerous. Thankfully, my friend was still trying to remember how to play Potemkin, so I was able to just get away with that. Um,
Yeah, I've seen a lot of YouTube, not YouTube, but animated. Well, yeah, videos, animated gifs
oh
of
yeah,
Potemkin just deleting people's health bars.
yes, Potemkin is very much still dangerous in this game. Potbuster, Potbuster is one of Potemkin's moves called Potemkin Buster, which is his main command throw. Uh, it basically just eats up half your health, pretty much. Um, and unless you're playing Chip, in which case I'm basically 2 touches from death if I get hit with Potbuster after that.
And shout out to King in Tekken 3,
Oh
who
yeah,
he introduced the Muscle Buster. If you watch the So like if the game runs and it plays on its own, there'll be a video where he demonstrates the muscle buster where he puts someone on their shoulders upside down, neck on his shoulders and their legs are in the air. So they're upside down on top of his shoulders, basically sitting on
oh
the
I didn't know
shoulders.
that.
And he jumps way up in the air and he comes down, and it takes I'd say about at least 1/4 of your health because it's a command throw. That
Yeah,
was in Tekken. In Tekken 3, it probably was closer to half. So I'd say like 1/3 your health bar.
damage was pretty
So
high.
so when I see Potemkin doing a similar move, um, I'm like, yeah, that's when he jumps way up in the air, rockets coming out of his back or something like that, so he can
Yeah.
take off. I'm like, yeah, this is a throwback to like King in Tekken 3.
Oh yeah.
King still has Muscle Buster as a regular throw, but it was introduced in Tekken 3. That's why I say shout out to that game.
Oh yeah. For sure. Yeah. Playing as Potemkin, very satisfying when you get one of those command throws off. Playing against Potemkin, pretty much just like I pretty much get heart palpitations every time because playing against Potemkin in Strive is a lot scarier compared to Exard, where uh, Potemkin definitely had to work a lot harder for that kind of damage. Everyone did, honestly, but I think there were only like a few characters that uh, that just got to have get free damage pretty consistently. But at the same time, like Strive continues to be sort of divisive when it's compared to its predecessors. Just because and it's mostly to preference, where it's just like there are some people who just prefer how Exart played or how the older games played. Whereas like now Strive Strive is trying to um balance like more accessibility while but also trying to do like new things with all of its characters. Like even though a lot of the moves are there, they're trying different stuff now where to the point where it's like Strive basically just feels like almost like a completely different game. To the point where some people are even arguing like, is this even a Guilty Gear game? Which I mean, like that might be too deep of a question to ask at this point. Because honestly, who knows? My friend and I were discussing for quite a while that it's just like, um, whether or not Strive succeeds, this one at the very least just feels like an experimentation of what they've done before and just trying out something new and just trying to see like, okay, like like Arxis is making way more games than ever now. Having come out in the last few years with quite a few games, Exart, Dragon Ball Fighters, Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, um, even going back to their older titles and adding rollback netcode is pretty significant too. And also with their upcoming game in June, DNF Duel, which seems to be taking a somewhat similar approach to Strive, but I guess like they're trying to keep it more in line with the original material of the game that one is based on, which is Dungeon Fighter Online, where it's more just like uh, I haven't played Dungeon Fighter Online all that much. I tried it out a bit after the game got announced, but it seems to be that the combos are based mostly around like special cancels and stuff like that. So what's interesting about DNF Duel is how like um when your health goes down, you actually get more meter available to you, um, which then allows you to do more specials over time as the match progresses, which is somewhat interesting.
A lot of people don't like those what they call comeback mechanics. Um,
Yeah,
a
for
lot
sure.
of games have been introducing mechanics like that. I mean, but which is ironic because there have been comeback mechanics built into fighting games forever, especially with the SNK series, King of Fighters and
Hmm.
Art of Fight. Like when your meter starts flashing red because you're low on health, especially in Samurai Showdown, your your power meter would fill up, right?
Yeah.
Like I remember playing King of Fighters 95. That was my first King of Fighters game. And you could do a super move in two instances. One, your super meter fills up, or two, your meter falls into the red, like your health.
Hmm.
So that tradition has always been in fighting games. So when you say things like, They're wondering if this is Guilty Gear. I'm like, what what do they mean? Like in this entire podcast, I've been talking about evolution in games, and it's
Yeah,
like if you've played well, I played video games for a long time, obviously, because I'm talking about video games that were like in the 80s and 90s in
yeah,
this during this podcast. But if you look at video games over the span of time, you can tell that a lot of mechanics come from other games, and they're placed in different genres. That creates different kinds of experiments and different kinds of effects. And in fighting games, which the basic is you beat your opponent up until their health bar is empty. Okay, well, how do we innovate? We introduce super meters and we introduce super moves, and now you don't have super moves anymore. Well, you do, but I'm saying you don't have to just do super moves that empty your entire entire power bar. Now you can do EX moves. So they're not just like super combos, one command does a whole combo,
hmm,
but now your fireball, it comes out multiple frames faster or does more damage, or and it uses a little bit of meter at a time. And so they have to they are finding ways to like innovate in that sense. And you either adapt to the new style or you don't.
yeah.
Personally, I don't like Tekken Tag Tournament. I don't like the idea of having to fight against two opponents. But that's a legitimate game. Like Tekken Tag 2 was very popular before Tekken Tekken 8 came, Tekken 7. I'm sorry. I want Tekken 8 to come out before Tekken 7 came out. And then Tekken 7 took the rage bar from Tekken 6. So the idea of rage, where
Yeah,
you
yeah,
do more
yeah,
damage just because you have low health, that's in Tekken 7 now. And then they added rage drives and rage arts. And, some people are like, I don't like that you can just do one command and like basically kill 1/3 of my health bar. Well, the counter argument to that is stop mashing buttons then. Bait it out and punish it,
yeah.
you know? So yeah, so there's always going to be changes in video games, and it's just a matter of whether or not you adapt or, you don't. That's it. If you like the
Oh
game
no, yeah,
series,
for
you'll
sure,
figure
for
it out.
sure. And I mean, like, it's also just interesting that this discussion is happening with Guilty Gear because it's like it's only been in recent years where it's like Guilty Gear has like finally become uh like an aware presence in fighting games now, whereas like before it was just kind of like, oh, it's that anime fighter that has like kind of like funky funky sound effects and stuff like that. But uh yeah, I mean, like, it it still is interesting, and I do like that Arxis is still taking their shot in the dark, so to speak, with Strive. Because I mean, like, if you don't try things to that like significantly shake up the formula, then you can't really see what else you can change, like I would say Street Fighter 5, comparing it now to back when it launched, it's sort of like there weren't really any significant changes to the game back when it launched. If anything, it was more like it felt like a serious downgrade, comparing it to the state that Street Fighter 4 was in um, previously. And then now it's just like now it's kind of like they added like a bunch of new stuff, which I can't really speak from experience at all to say like how much of it has really changed, but it has like definitely improved the game. Stuff like access to different supers, or not supers, V triggers rather, um, and V skills, V shift, which is basically a reinvention of the focus dash cancel from Street Fighter 4. Um, and and I mean honestly, like I still think fighting games are are still very exciting. It's just that like uh we've now like hit a very crucial point for the subgenre where it's like these these companies have had to take a hard look at their legacy games and kind of just think like, okay, like whatever we've been doing before has no longer it is like no longer working. um like even KOF 15, uh which has like which is probably like the longest running fighting game franchise next to Tekken 7, where like moves haven't really changed uh what their inputs are, have now adopted more universal inputs in favor of keeping the games relevant, which is good because I mean, like, I don't want to lose King of Fighters to the wind and like see it just become like dust. Like King of Fighters is still one of my favorite franchises, even if I don't play professionally. Even I just like what SNK does with those characters and um the heartfelt effort that they put into every one of their games, even if you don't really see the visual effort in their more modern games now. Um, but uh, yeah, I don't really know where to go from that, but I'm not even sure how we got onto this.
Well, the thing is, you were asking what I was playing, and then you shared what you were playing, and so you were talking
Yes,
about Guilty Gear and that sort of thing. But I think we are trying to transition to the boomer shooters at some point, though.
yeah, we do. We probably should. So I don't really know how to transition into it, so I guess we'll just start. So speaking of innovation, I suppose we could talk about the boomer shooters, or I guess in favor of something more polite, I will say retro shooters. Um,
Yeah, I like that better.
okay,
Especially the indie developed series of retro shooters. Yeah, I like
yeah.
that better.
You want to talk about like the efforts of New Blood, pretty much the progenitor of the indie retro shooters, releasing pretty much like some of the biggest bangers of them all. Uh, Most recently, Ultra Kill, but also not to mention a Medieval and Dusk as well. Although, actually, for Dusk and a Medieval, they're producers for those games, but indie developed games nonetheless. You got um 3D Realms kind of making a comeback, which is pretty crazy in this day and age. Apogee Entertainment has also recently like announced their comeback as well, with a few modest titles right now, but a couple of big ones coming back. Shadow Warrior, Serious Sam, uh, Doom coming back, and probably one of the biggest swings ever in kind of like remaking the franchise from the ground up to a degree. Uh, it's it's very interesting, but I guess like to kind of start things off, I wanted to ask you, Maurice, since you're more the expert in this area, uh, what what would you say is like your favorite out of like the older retro shooters, and then like well, I'll ask the follow up after that. Let's just start with the favorite.
So I kind of gave it away earlier. Maybe it wasn't the pre-show part, but yeah, Duke Nukem 3D
Mm,
is my favorite, and even playing through Shadow Warrior 3 recently, I sort of reminisced. Actually, what happened was I wrote the review, and then you were talking about articles, like how you were inspired by me writing critical pieces, and so it took me a while to write that review for a couple of reasons. Um, One was more personal, in regards to some marital conflicts. You know, I've been married going on 17 years now,
Mhm.
and you know, there's always, you know, I just want to say that, you know, it's never perfect, but you always work toward it. So, you know, sometimes you might get into a conflict, and that impacts life. All right, so we're over it. We've gotten over that hurdle.
Okay.
So my personal life got it, you know, mixed in with my professional, where I had to drop that and, you know, focus all my energy in my marriage. And the other part was, man, Lo Wang is such an awful stereotype. Holy crap. It's so bad.
Uh,
And so I started writing an article about that. Okay.
okay.
But, you know, going back to Duke Nukem 3D, you know, super ultra macho. So you're talking about the era of Jean-Claude Van Damme and Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger, big guns, big muscles, you know, women with big boobs, all that kind of stuff. Just very bombastic in every area that it can be. But it was a fun game, and I mean, it was the game where police were pigs, literal pigs, and like, so it touched on a lot of like controversy. You know, this was the 90s this was the beginning of 90s extreme,
Right.
with Duke Nukem 3D. Like, we're just gonna go out there, you know, no grenades, but we're gonna do pipe bombs instead. You know, we do have rocket propelled grenades, automatic shotgun, but it had cool weapons too, like the shrink ray gun,
Mhm.
or the ice gun, where you freeze people and then you kick them and they shatter into pieces. You know, you blow things up and they blow up into gibs all over the place. You know, whereas with Doom, you would kill someone and they would just, you know, fall out and flop into like just a pile of whatever its pixelated frame was. But in Duke Nukem, you could blow people to literal bits, and that was revolutionary. You know, the jetpack, you know, finding secrets. So now it's true 3D. So in those days, 3D just meant you're not on a one plane. So like the original Mario Brothers, you know, you go from left to right.
Mhm.
You know, 3D for us in those days was being able to circle strafe someone, and that's 360 degrees for us, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was high tech back in those days.
Yep.
Okay, circle strafing. And then in Doom, you couldn't even jump. So now you can now you're getting vertical in your games. Um, so yeah, so that was always my favorite because of all of its pop cultural references. You know, one of mine is in the Atomic Edition expansion. You're going through a police station and there's a plaque, you know, a desk that's John McClane's name, and Duke Nukem goes, "Yippee ki yay, mother," you know, in his Duke Nukem voice, and I was like, "Oh man, Die Hard," because I love the Die Hard movies.
Mm.
So like, it did that kind of stuff, and you know, in those days, you know, what is that saying? You know, imitation is the best form of flattery.
You're right.
So like, you know, Duke Nukem 3D, there's an earthquake in the game. Like, you're traversing and you hit back in those days, a set piece was, you would traverse in the area and you would hit a trigger that the developers have put in the map, and it would cause an enemy to appear or a building to explode or whatever. Very, very smaller scale to what we're used to. I think the most famous one is in episode 1, where you find a button, you hit it, and a whole building explodes. Like, it just shrinks. It's like tall, but you have to remove it down to rubble, and you go down into the sewer to keep going into like a strip club or something.
Oh wow.
Um, so yeah, so that was Duke Nukem 3D. So the screen shakes and there's an earthquake, and it splits the level into this ravine where you're supposed to descend. And Duke Nukem goes, "I ain't afraid of no Quake," because Quake was coming, right? So Duke Nukem 3 is like
Oh.
1993 and Quake is like 1994 or so.
Oh
And so
wow.
this is in the era of shareware. So you didn't buy the full game. You
Right.
bought like the first episode. And if you liked it, you mailed in or you called a number, paid over credit card, and they would give you a code to unlock the rest of the game.
Mm.
So in those days, like when a new PC game was coming out, it would hit news and all that kind of stuff, and you would get like the demo disc. Everyone had the demo discs, and piracy aside, that was a thing. Like people would unlock the game and then publish it somewhere else or
Mhm.
make copies if they had that software to do so. It was expensive to do in those days. Full versions of games. But yeah, he says I ain't afraid of no Quake because Quake was the new. Like now we're going from um, sprites in 3D to polygons,
Right.
which requires Matrox Voodoos and ATI all in ones, or whatever the basic video graphics cards were back in those days
Mhm.
to render. Super intense stuff. So yeah, so to answer your question, basic question, Duke Nukem 3D for me was the one because it did so many things that are just awesome. Just like it's to this day it's an excellent game to play
Mhm.
if you can find some of the remastered versions.
I'm pretty sure a lot of those games are still available on GOG. So, um,
So, for example, in my Steam library, I have Duke 3D 20th Anniversary and Duke 3D Megaton Edition. I actually don't know the difference between those two. Okay, one is Duke 3D World Tour. So one of these games includes an extra episode. And so here's the thing about backlogs, right?
mhm.
So I need to get back to it, play through the game, and play the new episode that they added that's unique.
Trailer started playing. I can't have that happening. Oh, okay. All right. So, yeah. So I guess for me, like, I didn't really start getting interested in retro shooters until basically like June 2016 came around. Um, and then I played that for a bit. I wasn't really feeling it at the time, so I put it away. And then like maybe 1 year after that, I came back to that game and beat it on normal. And then just kind of realizing like, oh wow, like that game was really fun. And I didn't think myself to be that big into shooters, except for like Borderlands. Uh, it's pretty much like the only other game that involves shooting that I was into at the time. Uh,
Which I would call an entirely it's a first person shooter, yes, but the genre is different. That's more
mhm,
of a looter shooter, right?
yeah.
Whereas Doom 2016 is more of an arena based shooter that has more similarities to Quake 3 Arena than like the original Doom.
Mhm. Yeah. And then I think around that point, I was starting to get interested, but I wasn't really sure like how to go about like playing those older games. Like there are plenty of ways, but there aren't exactly um like quote unquote legitimate ways to play like the quote unquote best version of those older games. And then I think that's around the time where one of my other friends shared a video by um, Civi11, who is who is just all of his videos are basically about those retro shooters or anything from like that era of video games, pretty much. And then just like watching that and uh, getting kind of a taste of what those types of games play like and stuff like that. But it was really only until I was watching his reviews of New Blood's games for Dusk and Amid Evil, where I was just like, oh my goodness, like these games look sick. I gotta get my hands on them. So I pretty much bought them like straight away, and then I started playing them a bit, and it was basically just like, wow, like this like actually feels fun, but completely different from like the shooters, from like the modern shooters I was kind of used to. Like I really only played like Halo for a little bit, and only with friends at college, and then like bits and pieces of Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and then playing this, it was kind of just like it was almost as if I had discovered a part of my childhood that I missed out on, if that makes sense. Where I'm just like, man, like
Because you did. Like,
in another timeline, I probably would have been super into these games instead of JRPGs, which is crazy to me to think about because it's like it's such a weird separation of of genres. And then like
so I just want to offer correction. So
yeah,
Quake was actually 1996,
oh
and
okay,
Duke 3D was 1996. So I imagine they were coming out in the same year.
right,
But when the expansion, like Atomic Edition, came out, it was probably like within 6 months later. So Quake probably released between Duke 3D's original release and the expansion. So that's when they added in the I ain't afraid of no Quake because, here's a new big bad coming out that's going to dethrone the king.
right,
But I'm saying that you probably did miss it in your childhood because to play a game like Quake, you needed like. So there was a time when computer hardware was expensive, and yes, that was in the 90s, and that's where you got your reputation for computer PC gaming being expensive
hmm
compared to buying a console. Not, you know, we're in COVID time, so things are expensive again, but everything's expensive now, right?
yeah,
And so computer gaming, PC gaming is a little bit more expensive. But yeah, you didn't play Quake and those sorts of things because you needed a PC, which were not. It wasn't. I won't say it was. It was beginning to become normal for people to have computers in their homes in the 90s, with the advent of AOL or America Online, right? So, like, the idea of being online, we're all on 56K modems where you had to disconnect your phone line to connect to the internet so no one could call you. We didn't have cell
yeah,
phones. So,
yeah,
to give the our younger audiences an idea of what it was like, yes, you had to disconnect your phone line that was to your house to connect to the internet. If someone called you, it would disconnect you. If your parents picked up the phone thinking they could use the phone while you were playing a game online, it would disconnect you and they yell at you, y'all get off the internet. I need to use a phone. I need to make a phone call, that sort of stuff. That's the 90s. Like we had like Packard Bells and like gateway computers and those sorts of things. Dell was coming on. Dude, you bought a Dell? That was even before that time.
yeah,
Um, and so like it wasn't normal. Now we have computers that are fat. Like there are people who have laptops that are slower than the phones in their hands right now in terms of like computer processing. So it was a different time then. It was.
yeah, for sure. Oh my goodness, that feels like forever ago now. Just like, and it's almost like it's not even really that far, in comparison to like how much technology has developed in that time. But that's just like crazy to me. Where it's like, yeah, in my childhood, I would have to deal with with phone line internet, and then it was just like, man, DSL, that's the way of the future. Like everything's gonna be DSL. And now it's just like, no. Now we've discovered laser internet. Where it's just like
Hey,
now you can beam terabytes of data with infrared and
AT&T literally just tore up our yards in my neighborhood to plant fiber optic. Right now, I'm using Comcast. I'm paying $120 a month for whatever the fastest internet speed they have.
mhm,
And when AT&T gives me a call and say, "Hey, we've got a fiber optic. You want some?" I'll be like, "Bet."
pretty much just like can't switch me fast enough. But yeah. So I guess since we did bring up New Blood quite often actually, I was wondering if any of those games you actually completed entirely, or and also just like which one of those games caught your eye at first? Since like you know Doom Doom 2016, I would consider kind of like the very first game that uh kind of reminded people about the legacy where retro shooters came from, but then it was pretty much around the time of like when I think Project Warlock came out, where it was like, okay, now we're starting to see these retro shooters come back, kind of like in full force almost.
So, yes, New Blood is a company, and they came back and they said, yes, we are going to do retro style shooters. Um, Doom 2016 was very much a renaissance. I would agree with that because you have to go back to Doom 3, Doom Cubed. I guess that's how they write it down sometimes.
Oh yeah,
And,
huh?
and people played that and they're like, this isn't a Doom that we remember because they were trying to do something a little bit more with depth, with more substance, because you have to go back even before that to Half Life, which introduced characters and NPCs and story and those sorts of things. And so, uh, not 3D interactive, id Software was like, yeah, let's do Doom, but with a story. So, like, we're going to have this Mars colony. It's not just going to be a throwaway story
Mm-hmm.
to provide context to why you're shooting demons on the planet Mars or Hellscape Earth. But no, we're actually going to show you the transformation of this space colony and how the demonic invasion transforms a level as you progress through it. And with some horror, like, of course, a demon invasion would be um, scary, right? So we're going to, I don't know what the decision in the room was to where you could only pick up your flashlight or your gun, and you just didn't, like, you know,
Oh, that's a
tape
thing.
your, yes, in Doom 3 you
Oh
could
my
either
goodness.
use your flashlight to see in pitch black or shoot, and when you shot it would create a lighting effect to where it would illuminate the room for a split second.
Right.
And so yeah, that was, the game was heavily criticized for that. And
Wow.
it was
That's
a
crazy.
it was a good Doom game, but it was not a great Doom game, which is why Doom 2016 was a return. So Doom 3 was more like it wasn't a slow crawl, but it was definitely slower than traditional Doom, traditional quote unquote, what do we say, retro shooter style, right?
Yeah.
It was supposed to be like an evolution that was supposed to be more story rich, but with Doom elements. One thing I do like about that game is that when it introduced a new enemy, it would get us introductory animation, a cinematographic, or what you would call it, right? A cutscene.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool, and I recommend that if you just want to check it out on YouTube, Doom 3 enemy cutscenes when they're introduced. That returned to Doom 2016, and they did that, and it's faster paced. And so Doom 2016 was a return to the fast, frantic pace of retro shooters
Yeah.
with a new element. So you get your story too. You can stop and listen if you want to, or you can just like blow through the game. But the important thing is that the pacing returned. Now it's not the horror of the demon invasion. You are the demon's horror. They make you retro. So from Doom guy, now you're the Doom Slayer, right? So
Yeah.
now you're the, you know, I don't know what the language thing on here is, but you're the bad
Every
A person.
every
Uh,
voice actor uh pulling out their best guttural growl in that game and just absolutely killing it. Oh my goodness.
yeah, so that's Doom 2016. All right,
Yeah.
so I'm sure New Blood Interactive just didn't play in 2016. Like, there's a long process to creating like indie companies and those sorts of things. So they probably didn't just see Doom 2016 was like, yeah, let's return to. We want to go even further back in time than that. They probably were in the process of formulating what that looked like to them.
Hmm.
And then they saw Doom, the success of Doom 2016, and said, yes, we definitely have a business case to proceed with a medieval Dusk Ultra Kill. So I do not have Ultra Kill, but I do have Dusk. I actually reviewed Dusk, and I gave it a middling score, somewhere in 6 or 7.
Mm.
Um, it aesthetically is very much like Doom. Excuse me, Quake, but I don't know. It's been years since I've played in what I said in my review, but I don't know. It just felt like it was missing something. Like for me, so there's Quake and there's Quake 2. Okay, so Quake 2 was the game that I actually liked. Quake 1 was more gothic horror.
Hmm.
Okay, Quake 2 is more sci-fi. And I already said on this podcast that I gravitate more towards sci-fi than high fantasy, and gothic horror is more fantasy than science fiction. And so I like the railgun in Quake 2. The little loop effect to this day is one of the coolest effects I've ever seen in any video games. And that's what I like. The frantic pace of that, the sci-fi monstrosities, the as you were saying with how do you say that RPG Shin Megami? What is that
Shin,
called?
it started with Megami Tensei, but the the trending term to like cover all of it is Mega 10. Yeah.
Okay, so that's what Quake was
Hmm.
like, the fusion of flesh and machine, and not in the cyberpunk clean kind of way where you have augmentations. No, I'm talking about the horrific, like you can see like veins and like the blood is still on the machine because it's like I just like ripped someone from their torso and stuck it on like a arachnid leg apparatus, and like it's not clean. It's a nasty, gross fusion that's unholy. Okay,
Hmm.
um, that was Quake to me, and Dusk is more Quake 1 than Quake 2.
Mm.
And
Okay.
I'm like, I'm not that impressed. And then some of the enemy designs were not all that. I didn't get the same effect of like, man, this is really like horrific or gross. It's just kind of like fodder enemies. And I was like, I don't know about this. I recently played a medieval though. Um, it was a backlog game, and like so Steam has like a play next, right? So it was on my play next, and I was like, all right, let me check this out because I'm familiar with Hexen. It wasn't a game that I played, but I know what Hexen is,
Hmm.
and I actually like a medieval. I think it captures the theme of what Hexen was trying to do. So now you're more magical. So now you're in the so yeah, I did critique high fantasy, but the weapons are really cool.
Yes,
Like
they
that's
they
the
very much are.
key to a good shooter is cool weapons. Like Dusk has like mostly standard weapons, shotgun, grenade launchers, stuff like that, a crossbow. Nothing that really wows me. A medieval, now I have like electric trident and like
All the weapons are good. They're all
yes,
great. I love them all. It's amazing. Like
that's what I love about first person shooters. Like, okay, so quick critique of Shadow Warrior. Well, maybe I shouldn't do that right now, but I'll say this. Um, what I liked about Dead Space, even though it scares me to death,
yeah.
um, is that the rail gun or whatever it's called, like the big stapler thing, that gun is legit from hour one to the end of the game, right?
Hmm.
I love weapons that are not only evolutionary. So, like on your keyboard, it used to be 1 through 0. It would fill up all your keys on in traditional shooters with a weapon for each key on your number pad or on your keyboard. But like when you get, say, the chain gun, the machine gun you get earlier isn't so much valuable, right? Like, yeah, it uses more ammo, but it's more powerful. So like that's why you want to use it. So you
Hmm.
don't use the old machine gun anymore. Once you get the super shotgun, you don't use the regular shotgun anymore. I like shooters that maintain the importance of every weapon throughout the entire game.
Yeah.
Okay. What they've started doing recently, though, with starting with Doom Eternal, and I've been noticing this in Shadow Warrior as well, Shadow Warrior 3, is when they get you a new weapon that's powerful. Well, actually, throughout the entire game, ammunition is limited. So in the middle of the arena fight, you have to switch weapons because you run out of ammunition. Because here's the biggest, baddest dude. So you use your biggest, baddest weapon against them. You're out of ammunition, so you can't use that big bad weapon anymore. You got to switch to another weapon to force you to use your entire arsenal.
Hmm.
That's a different design direction, I would call it. Design purpose, ideation, manifestation, whatever you want to call it, than I'm going to give you these different kinds of weapons, and there's a use for them at all times throughout the entire game.
Yeah.
And that's what a medieval does with its arsenal, and it's impressive.
Uh, would you would you say that a medieval balances the weapon usage more than like Doom Eternal, even? Or would that be
Um,
too far of a comparison between the two?
I think it's too far of comparison. I was just so it is high fantasy. Doom Eternal is a sequel
Hmm.
as well, so medieval is more of a not a spiritual successor, but like a recognition, a nod, right? Like
Hmm.
a hats off to Hexen. Um, so a medieval, like this power ups even allows you to go into like God mode, and you can run around with your axe if you want to, the basic battle axe, which can still a legitimate weapon. And then you can charge your weapons too, and they have super effects. Like once you're going to go into God mode, your weapon properties change, right?
Yeah.
That's different than Doom 2016 Doom Eternal, where you progress through the game, you find an upgrade to your weapon, and you can choose a different path. Like, do I want to add missile launchers to my machine gun, or do I want my machine gun to, I don't know, not have to reload or something like that? Like, they're two different kind of experiments in terms of weaponization and how that's deployed. I don't. I'll say I'm not necessarily a fan of being locked out of an upgrade. I like to be able to choose, like
Hmm.
toggle. My memory is kind of fuzzy. I'm not sure if in Doom you get locked out or you get to toggle, but usually one upgrade is better than the other. And I don't have a reason, like, I want one upgrade rather than the other, and I don't miss it at all. I've seen that in games too, where, um, you know, actually Doom Eternal is a good example because there's a certain weapon where it's like a it's like it functions like a sniper rifle, and you can fire like one big shot or like multi-shot or something like that. I don't know. Memory's fuzzy about that.
Hmm.
I just know that I really liked the weaponization in medieval. I like the encounters. Um, yeah, it's just a very well designed game that I liked much more than Dusk. Um, Interestingly enough,
Hmm.
now I got to look up the Doom Eternal weapon so I don't. I've been sounding like I actually know what I'm talking about now, but I haven't played Doom Eternal in so long, but specifically because of the freaking what's that one enemy with a shield? I hate him. Worst mechanic in the game, so bad.
Oh, the wait, are you talking about
The Marauder,
the Marauder? Yeah.
like Marauder, I've gone back to play Doom 2016. I have not. I have played Doom Eternal one time, and I never went back
Hmm.
because I hate the Marauder so much. It breaks everything about retro shooters that we love. It introduces a, a boss like basic enemy
Hmm.
that changes the mechanics of the game to defeat him. It's a betrayal of everything about that we love about retro shooters, where you can just run and gun. You
Right.
can't just run and gun this boss. You have to like stand there and wait for a certain frame to shoot. Otherwise, it'll just pop up his shield and block your shot anyway.
Mm.
Like it's dumb. Like it's I have to go around. If a Marauder shows up, I have to run around the entire room, clear every enemy, then come back to the Marauder. I hate it. It's dumb. Um, and it's definitely it's more than a step back. It's a leap back from what we actually wanted. I can't even think of a first person shooter that introduces an enemy that you can't shoot unless it's like even like in Half Life when it introduces a boss, there are areas that are always shootable. You know,
Hmm.
you'd have to go into Housemark style games, arcade style shooters, where the boss is only vulnerable after it's gone through its cycle of attacks
Right.
to replicate what the Marauder does, because that's basically what the Marauder is.
Yeah.
It goes through a cycle of attacks that is only vulnerable at a certain time.
Which is
And
interesting
that's,
to think about because because Resogun, from what I saw, it looks like a shmup. So what you're basically saying is that to you, the Marauder is a shmup boss in a
yes,
FPS game,
yes, he is.
which is
And yeah, you can go on YouTube
yeah,
and find the like
which is
speed
definitely
runners.
like those are two dangerous territories to try to include into the same type of category. Uh,
Hey, but Housemarque pulls it off with Returnal. They
yeah.
actually pull it off successfully, and it's an outstanding game. But like, you can go on YouTube. What I was going to say is, you can go on YouTube and find the speedrunners who dispatch the Marauders easily, and they're like, "Yeah, that's super easy. Just do this." But
Mhm.
like I said before, well, maybe I didn't frame it in this way, but I'm framing it now. You shouldn't have to refer to like YouTube to like try to figure out how to make this person really easy.
Yeah.
Um, either they're supposed to be easy or they're supposed to be difficult, is how I look at it. And I look back at Left 4 Dead, the witch. You remember that enemy type,
Yeah.
the one that sings, and every witch encounter is supposed to be a serious one,
Yeah.
not like the tank where you just throw a Molotov cocktail and you run away for 45 seconds or whatever, and he eventually fizzles out automatically.
Right.
I'm talking about, if there's a witch in your path, someone has to be trained to crown her, because if not, someone's getting knocked down. It's going to be
Right.
a hot mess, right? So like, that's the Marauder. Like, the Marauder is like in your first person shooter,
Yeah.
um a game that breaks the pace. And in Left 4 Dead, the witch, if she spawns in a place where she's unavoidable, like, you got to stop what you're doing and figure out how to, which player in your party knows how to properly crown her,
Mm.
or crone, crown spelled with a zero, like own. So whoever can one shot her, because if she gets up, because we're talking about playing on hard mode like it's supposed to be, okay? Like
Oh,
Left
okay.
4 Dead, we're talking about if she gets up and she one hits people, like, it's going to be a hot mess. Someone, that's Marauder. But anyway, back to retro shooter. So yeah, Medieval, I love it. I have not played Ultra Kill. When I look at it, um, it kind of gives me Dusk vibes, um, aesthetically,
Mhm.
even though it's more modern, like it has higher tech weapons. I'll get it eventually, but that's the other thing. I typically don't buy early access games. If I'm going to play an early access game, I'm usually doing a review copy.
Understandable.
So that's another reason why I haven't played it yet.
Yeah. I think it has officially come out by this point, but excuse me. But I remember when I first tried it out, um, there were some things about it that actually did remind me more of Dusk than I would have figured, actually. Um, but like the biggest thing for me that made me like Dusk so much was actually like um the movement in that game. Where it's like I kind of just realized just by running around in Dusk is already like relatively fast. It's like a reasonable speed. But if you just start hopping everywhere, you can like start to rocket across stages in Dusk. Uh which was honestly pretty fun, if not uh a little bit intense and somewhat headache inducing because of the amount of speed you're getting uh just by like hopping around. But that's what I really liked about it. But in Ultra Kill's case, what was really interesting was like how it wasn't just the movement, but also like how gameplay works in that game. So just as an example, there isn't really an aim in Ultra Kill. But you technically do have an alt fire. The alt fire is just a punch though. But off the bat, you do uh you are basically taught that the punch allows you to reflect projectiles that are shot at you. So if enemies are shooting at you, you can just punch the bullet back, and it does like double damage to them. And Ultra Kill has a combo meter in the
Yeah,
game.
that's cool.
Yeah. So there's already that. I don't want to get too into it because I don't want to spoil all the tricks you can do with that. It's quite fun, honestly, but there's some stuff that I learned like very early on about that game where it's just like where like I learned about it through someone else, and then I went, "You can do what now?" And then I went and did it, and then I go, "Oh my goodness, I don't think I can play any other way now." And then I find something else that I can do as well that's like slightly different.
I do have to correct both of us real quick.
Okay.
I just remembered a very important legacy game, like literally the inventor of the first person shooter. You know what that game is?
Uh, I'm not gonna know. I was gonna say Half-Life, but I don't think that's even close.
I'm talking about no, Half Life is after Duke 3D and all that kind of stuff. I'm talking about the first person shooter ever in the history of video games.
Oh, like just like even the point of view. Oh my god.
Yes,
Yeah, I
like
would not even know. I don't have an idea.
Wolfenstein 3D.
Really?
That's the first ever.
That's the
And
first one?
so I'm mentioning giving that a shout out because we mentioned Doom's 2016 as a reminder of the legacy of retro shooters when it was actually Wolfenstein New Order in 2014 that came out that refreshed it. And actually, Wolfenstein has been coming out with games even before the New Order. Like the New Order is just the hot modernized version. But I remember playing Return to Castle Wolfenstein in the early 2000s. You know, that was when Call of Duty was born. Medal of Honor was still a thing. So you're talking about like a long form history of first person shooters. But Wolfenstein: The New Order was a return to form. You know, modern graphics. You know, all that good stuff.
Right.
Um, but like people, I think in general, were not as familiar with Wolfenstein. Um, but Doom 2016, of course, the pacing and the soundtrack and all that kind of stuff, which actually is the same composer. The composer who does Wolfenstein: The New Order also does Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal.
Oh yeah, he did. Yeah, I
Yes, he
forgot.
did. Um, yeah, they had a falling out though
Yeah.
with Iz, so that's sad. Also did Killer Instinct soundtrack, if I can remember correctly.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Um, so yeah,
Oh,
so Wolfenstein: The New Order brought it back 2014, but of course, like I said, Doom 2016 was probably in development when the New Order came out. And yeah, New Order was good, you know, graphically intense and all that kind of stuff. It was fun. It had a story, and that's the other thing we're talking about, like first person shooters having stories, whereas the retro shooters go back to like not really caring about plot development and
mm,
character development and stuff like that. Like the character might not even have a personality. He might not even say anything like Duke Nukem does. Or Lo Wang in the Shadow Warrior, or whatever the character's name in Blood. Um, which I think there's supposed to be a new version of Blood or something like that coming out as well.
I think so. I'm not entirely sure actually. There's so many of these games coming out now that it's kind of getting intense as to like what's actually getting remade or not. Uh,
It was Night Dive. So Night Dive is also responsible for doing a lot of
yes.
remakes and
Yeah.
stuff. So they did Blood Fresh Supply, which makes it possible to play Blood on modern systems. Because you were talking about good old games or GOG,
Mhm.
and yeah, a lot of the retro stuff's on there. But you know, Night Dive has really been dedicating themselves to making it possible to play old games in HD, basically.
Yeah.
And
Which is
I
great.
loved Blood because of its unique, like, you use a flare gun in that game, and
Mm.
like you're actually hitting people with stakes because you're fighting like demon monstrosity. So you just use like found weapons,
Oh
the
man.
lighter, you know, with the spray as a flamethrower, that kind of stuff, or like the voodoo doll, a pitchfork. So Blood was another game
Yeah.
that I really enjoyed back in those days. Project Warlock is another modern retro shooter.
Hmm.
I've played some of that, and it has RPG elements. I've mostly been shooting things. I've been casting many spells because I'm such a low level character. Its pacing could use some work.
Mm.
Like I want to be a warlock. I want to be able to cast spells, but my character is too level to do so. So I guess you got to invest a certain number of hours into the game before that unlocks. And I don't know. I think you have to be able to give the player something that will hook them so that they will stay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you have to kind of earn it in that game.
Yeah, you definitely do. Project Warlock is definitely much more of a slow burn in comparison to a lot of the other games of that uh indie genre nowadays. And it kind of was like one of the first ones to come out, and it was sort of doing like a hybrid of those ideas with some other gameplay elements where it's like Dusk and the Medieval are pretty much basically just like, no, we're going straight back to like Unreal Tournament, Quake, and Doom. Like uh those are our reference reference points to go off of. Uh,
And speaking of which, Wrath, Aeon of Ruin, have you played that one?
oh,
That's the one
no,
you were
not
mentioning
yet.
because you were saying 3D Realms is getting back into the game, and that's the
Yeah,
that's
that's
the
the
one.
one. That's the
So
one.
it's early access. Like I said, I generally don't play early access games
Mhm.
under only certain conditions. But I cannot wait till it goes into full version because that's the game that looks like what I wanted Dusk to be.
Uh, Looking real
Like when
quick.
you look at it, it's beautiful, man. It looks so
Yeah.
so Dusk feels like, and that's the thing. So I'm a stickler when it comes to the aesthetics of video games. Like I got tired of pixel art because it's like we have such beautiful games like Ori and the Blind Forest. Why am I playing pixel art based games?
Mhm.
Like it should only be for, I don't know, specific instances where I'll tolerate it. I don't want to play games that look actually worse than 16-bit era. Like, like pixel art get so Dusk aesthetically tries to replicate Quake in a way, but it's like, why do Quake when we know Quake 2 or Quake 3 exists? And
Mhm.
Wrath respects that. Wrath looks like Quake 3 ish. And I appreciate that. Like, you can give me a retro shooter and it still look good. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
I don't think the polygonical polydiagonal. I don't know what that word is. The polygon, the density of um, assets in Dusk are not up to par,
Mm.
even for an indie game standards. But Wrath Aeon of Ruin is, in my opinion, or even a medieval. The medieval looks like Hexen. Dusk doesn't look like Quake to me.
Yeah.
Um, but Wrath Aeon Ruin looks great, and I can't wait to play it. Shout out to Black Mesa, which is the remake of the original Half Life.
Mm.
You basically using Half Life 2's engine to create that game. Also, an excellent, if you want to call Half Life, if I think Half Life would capstone the era of 90s shooters. I think it's like 1999 or something like that.
Mm.
That's basically the end of the decade. And so, like, that's the best of them. That's the when people want to use the cliche full circle. That's the full circle of the evolution of the first person shooter from Wolfenstein to Half Life. And then after Half Life, that's when you get into like Medal of Honor, Call of Duty gets introduced. You got a bunch of other games in there, some 3D, Duke Nukem spinoffs, third person, all that kind of stuff. But I think Half Life caps it off, and Black Mesa is a callback to the original Half Life with Half Life 2 graphics, and it's outstanding.
Yeah, for sure. I think yeah, we've been going for quite a while now, so I think unfortunately we're gonna have to wrap up. But yeah, oh boy, so so much to unpack. Honestly, it's kind of crazy. I mean, like we didn't even get to talk about Heat and Blood, right? Which came out last year and is another uh retro shooter as well. And then there's a couple other ones that are in early access that I'm looking at here. Forgive Me Father, Dread Templar, um, which I think is also kind of going for. I'm not sure what you would call this. Would this be more of a blood vibe or um
What's the name of the second game? Blood Templar?
Dread Templar?
Ah, yes, yes, yes. This popped up on my recommendations recently. Okay.
Yeah,
I did see this one. So yes,
yeah,
yeah, also early access game. It's on my wish list, so I'm tracking it.
yeah. We
Um
haven't, and I mean like we haven't even talked about one of the more interesting retro shooter titles, Cruelty Death Squad, which is basically like, what if we did a retro shooter as like a form of a form of like a cynical art statement? And I mean like that
I think that's more your realm of exotic weird games, dude.
probably probably. I mean straight up the game looks like trash, but at the same time it's also just incredibly fascinating.
It's an acid trip. That's what
Yeah.
it looks like to
Oh,
me.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's like seeing that game on Steam is like, what is this itch.io game doing on this? Um
Yeah, and I didn't get to talk about I mentioned Shadow Warrior 3,
yeah.
and it's everything I think that is wrong with a retro shooter.
Mhm.
It tries to recapture its glory days without adding anything necessarily new. Just the same old like tropes. And in the way that Duke Nukem Forever, you kind of failed because Duke Nukem is an archaic character. We're people want to say or use political correctness, but there's a reason why big macho muscular guys in movies it doesn't sell anymore because that's not a thing. The
Right.
Rock is a sensitive individual. He's a man with emotions. He's more than just muscles and sex appeal.
Yeah.
Even though women do swoon for him, he sings.
Yeah.
Have you seen Moana? He's not just this male power. He's not just a male power fantasy.
Yeah.
Who's a womanizer, and that's what Duke Nukem Forever was stuck in, and Shadow Warrior Lo Wang, he's sort of stuck in that character trope, and it's
Yeah.
it's it's not just politically incorrect; it's inappropriate. It's just straight up inappropriate. Uh,
Yeah.
and then the gameplay is sort of mailed in, like it tries to copy Doom
Mm.
and
It
doesn't offer very much of its
I
own.
I I definitely got like some pretty big Doom Eternal vibes, but not quite in the same way, I think. Um which is weird because I feel like both those games are kind of cartoony. But anyway, Maurice, thanks so much for coming on. It was a real pleasure to have you here. Is there anything you'd like to plug or tell people where to find you? Anything like that?
Yeah, I can do that. Um, So yeah, so I'm usually offering hot takes on Twitter. I'm Maurice Pogue 83, MAURICEPOGUE 83 on Twitter. I also have a blog, Blurred Beats, BLERD BEATS.com. I've been kind of busy, so I haven't been publishing lately, but I'm definitely going to get back to it. So I plan on putting up a lot of content in the future. Just, if you like what you heard on this podcast, then you can read my thoughts there.
All right. Well, once again, thank you very much for coming on. It was finally glad to get to do this with you. And for the rest of this, thanks everyone for watching. As always, like and comment if you liked what you heard or didn't like what you hear. I want to know what you think. And subscribe to the channel if you want to keep seeing stuff like this. And
Yeah,
we'll
thanks for
catch you
having me.
later.
Yeah,
Yeah, for
thanks for
sure.
having me on. We can do this again.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We got the other big one that we gotta get into. So, but again, thanks everyone, and take care of yourselves. Peace.